Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, NCDE. I'm Justin Harford. I'm going to be your moderator today, but before we get started, and as people are filing in, Monica Malhotra, our project manager, is going to talk about accessibility for this webinar so that everybody can have the most inclusive experience possible.
Great. Thanks, Justin. And this is very relevant to the topic of this webinar, but I'm just going to go over a few access tips for this session using Zoom. So throughout the webinar, please turn off your microphones and videos until a moderator invites you to turn them on. And this is important for especially optimal view of the ASL interpreter that we have. If you plan to use audio, a quiet room and/or headphones is also recommended. And to view the captions, you can click at the CC button at the bottom of your screen or use the stream text link that's provided in the chat box. If you have a comment or question, please send a chat to the host, to myself in the chat box. If there's anything that you need, if we're going too fast, if anybody needs to speak louder, then please just send that information through the chat box, and then we'll make sure to address the panelist and the moderator. Use the hide non-video participants feature to make it easier to see the interpreters and speakers. So it's important for us to see and learn about more recently, but I'm just moving to the next slide. And on the image on the left is a meeting where we're not hiding non-video participants, where there's about 30 boxes, black screens with different people's names in it, people's photos, there's active presenters, there's interpreters, and it's just a bit of a clutter to be able to engage and view the interpreters and the presenters. On the picture on the right is only the interpreters and the active presenters. And the way you're going to do this is if you go to a participant's box at the top right corner, there's a drop-down menu, and one of the menu items should be hide non-video participants. If you click on that one, then it'll just bring to the front the images of the interpreters and the active presenters. Additional information for keyboard shortcuts. So if you are using screen reader software and are using keyboard shortcuts, these are a few tips. Alt-A is for mute, Alt-H is for chat, Alt-Y is for raising your hand, and Alt-V is to turn your video on. And now I'm going to pass it over to Justin, the moderator for the session today.
Thank you, Monica. Monica, as the host, I want to ask if maybe you could, it's no problem if you can't, but if you can go into the caption settings and attempt to block screen reader notifications of people entering and leaving. If not, I can do my own solution over here. At any rate, my name is Justin Harford. I am a project coordinator with the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange. Today, I am the man behind the curtain. You can think of me as Justin of Oz or maybe Justin of Eugene. Though you cannot see me, everything that happens in the webinar is all my responsibility, except the bad things. Those are Monica's responsibility. However, I'm trying to make sure that my video is not showing so that we have all our panelists have plenty of real estate on your screen. And we have a great lineup today. Earlier this week, if you joined us for our digital access discussion in which Monica and Jamie presented, we covered the general basics of how to just make virtual environments accessible. And this was more broadly speaking in the context of meetings, of webinars like this, a variety of broad applications. And in this webinar, we have three of our colleagues, Lisa George from World Learning, Rebecca Berman from American Councils, and Meredith Lopez from IREX, all excellent partner exchange providers that we've been working with for years and who all in some capacity have experience with virtual exchange programs. And especially over the last year, they've had even more experience with virtual exchange programs. And so today we're going to hear from these panelists about the experience of their about their experience with this area. And we're going to learn more about what access to virtual environments looks like when specifically applied to virtual exchange programs. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists to just please briefly introduce yourself and your organization's virtual exchange programs. A little bit about what you do, and about the virtual exchange offerings of your organization. And I'd like to invite Meredith Lopez to open this question up.
Thanks so much, Justin. As Justin said, my name is Meredith Lopez, and I am a senior program officer at IREX. IREX is an international nonprofit organization that builds a more just, prosperous, and inclusive world by empowering youth, cultivating leaders, strengthening institutions, and extending access to quality education and information. We operate in more than 100 countries around the world, and I primarily work in our leadership practice, which cultivates leaders through exchange and development programs. Primarily, I work on the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders, but I and many of my colleagues working on different programs have had different opportunities to work on virtual programs this year. Some programs, like our Global Solutions Sustainability Challenge, already had a significant virtual component to them. They involve different groups of students in different countries collaborating together, but others like the Mandela Washington Fellowship, Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative, and other programs had to completely pivot to working virtually this year. And so we've all, depending on the structure of our program, timing, and other elements, have done a variety of things to make our programming accessible to folks, and I'm looking forward to talking about that a bit more in a little bit.
Thank you, Meredith. How about let's hear from Rebecca Berman.
Thank you, Justin. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Berman, and I'm a program officer with the National Security Language Initiative for Youth Program, which is a program at the U.S. Department of State, which is administered by American Council for International Education. And NSLY is a program for high school students to study less commonly taught languages overseas. And the programs I'll kind of be talking about today are NSLY BSI, which is the Virtual Summer Intensive Program, which is a traditional summer program that we transitioned online this past summer. And then we also have our Virtual Academic Year Program, which is a traditional overseas academic program that we also transitioned online. And then another unique program we have is called Virtual NSLY. And what's a little bit different with Virtual NSLY is, unlike NSLY BSI or the Virtual Academic Year Program, Virtual NSLY was always designed to be online. And Virtual NSLY is a program for beginning language level learners only, whereas with our regular NSLY programs is for all different language level. And my colleague Sarah Hansen might also be able to answer some questions about Virtual NSLY. And thank you for having me here today. I look forward to talking to you all about the program and hearing from Meredith and Lisa.
Thank you, Becca, and let's hear from Lisa George.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. So my name is Lisa George. I am a youth programs manager at World Learning. World Learning, for those that don't know, were founded 85 years ago on the belief that international exchange programs cultivate intercultural understanding and create leaders who are equipped to address the world's most complex problems. I've been with the organization for over 5.5 years, specifically working on youth programs, our youth exchange. So today, when I will be giving examples, I'll be focusing on the programming we pivoted this summer on our youth exchange unit. This summer, really May through August, we implemented 11 virtual programs for 1,000 high schoolers from around the world completed the Experiment Digital, which is our flagship youth virtual program, and 325 more youth and adult educators from Argentina, Canada, Chile, Iraq, Mexico, and the United States participated in pivoted U.S. Department of State ECA funded programs under the Youth Ambassadors Portfolio, Jóvenes en Acción, and the Iraqi Young Leaders Exchange Program, or ILEP. Currently, our team at World Learning and our partners at Amigos de las Americas in Georgetown under the Youth Ambassadors Consortium are also implementing 3 virtual youth and master's programs for an additional 100 participants from Bolivia, Peru, Costa Rica, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. So we've already been able to incorporate our lessons learned from virtual summer implementation to these pivoted fall exchanges. So look forward to talking more about that.
Thanks, Lisa. And kind of a follow-up, I think you've mentioned to us here that that World Learning has transitioned a number of programs to virtual, but in fact, even before the pandemic started, you already had programs that were following a virtual format. And I was curious, what were some of the unique advantages that you perceived even before the pandemic started with offering international virtual exchange programs?
Yeah, so World Learning has really an extensive track record in online learning and exchange, from launching massive open online courses for the U.S. Department of State's American English e-teacher program to developing substantial online components for programs such as the Communities Connecting Heritage program and the International Visitors Leadership program. As I mentioned earlier, our flagship youth virtual exchange program is the Experiment Digital, or TED. It was launched with a 2016 Stevens Initiative grant as the Digital Young Leaders Exchange Program, and expanded and was renamed in 2019 under another Stevens Initiative grant. So TED was designed as this immersive experiential virtual exchange that, since it was started, has connected more than 2,000 youth in the United States in the MENA region. Initially, the online format was really created to expand access to intercultural leadership programs for students who are not able to travel due to politics, gender restrictions, visa issues, or limited financial resources. Inherent to the TED model was an ability to replicate and scale programs easily. And this is something that was particularly necessary this year due to COVID, travel and health restrictions, and everything that has come from that. World Learning was somewhat fortunate, and we originally had 2 exchanges scheduled for spring, in-person exchanges that were canceled last minute due to COVID and the uncertainty. And I think those early cancellations really spurred us to start developing our concept paper early, before massive shelter-in-place orders were in place, to really get ahead of the uncertainty as much as we could. I think we're all still continuing to work in this gray area, but that early, I guess, effect of what program cancellation looked like, both in the United States and with the programs that were incoming to the United States, I think really helped us just start to work ahead and plan within uncertainty for the summer.
Thank you, Lisa. And it's interesting. I heard, scalability and cost savings, a couple key things that even outside of pandemic season would make virtual exchanges valuable. And I can even probably added flexibility too. I think I gathered that. I think I'm going to direct this next question to Becca, and you can also comment on the previous question. But what format do your virtual exchange follow? What format do your virtual exchange programs follow? So that means describing the balance between asynchronous and synchronous content, video, online discussion, and downloadable materials.
Yeah, great question. So with the Initially Live BSI program, it was traditionally a summer overseas program, and we work with implementing partners, which are different NGOs and universities, including American Council. And our implementing partners are the ones who administer the program on site. So working with the teachers, the curriculum, students, and their language learning process. So for this virtual exchange program, when we transitioned online, the implementing partners were the ones who were able to decide on which platforms they wanted to use. So we left it up to them to decide. We did require a certain number of synchronous contact hours, which would be mainly the classroom language lesson. And then asynchronous hours were kind of dependent on the partner. Often this past summer, the asynchronous contact hours were more related to cultural lessons. And for virtual Initially Y, which is solely online even before the pandemic, is administered only by American Council. And I want to see if my colleague Sarah Hansen is on the call. Let's see.
Hi, Becca.
Yeah,
I'm
hi,
here.
Sarah, if you want to talk about virtual Nestle Y setup.
Certainly. I will leave my camera off if no one has any issues with that. So in terms of virtual Nestle Y, and this again is the program that we piloted in 2019 and have continued now in 2020, meant always to be virtual, specifically for novice, very beginner, don't know anything language learners for Arabic, Russian, Chinese, and Korean. And the format essentially is a 10-week program meeting twice per week for originally only 1 hour per meeting. But based on feedback from the students previously, we increased that to 1.5 hours per meeting. So in total, that is 30 contact hours. And we advise our teachers to include about 1 hour of homework per class meeting. So it's a little bit more synchronous time overall than asynchronous, though I do find that the students who are really excited about language learning tend to just put in a lot of extra time on their own, working on their different projects and assignments outside of class. And we also see that the super engaged students who like interacting with each other on the platform that we use, or maybe even just social media that they share between each other, are engaging even more outside of class. So I just learned what Discord is this year, which I feel like is coming up a lot more for lots of virtual program officers and managers, all these different social media platforms that are used. But we do try to keep an even balance on the homework and in-class sessions, so that there's sort of equal amounts of time being given towards, synchronous work with the teacher that some students enjoy and really like thrive on, and then those outside of class assignments that are sometimes better for students who take a little bit more time or enjoy sort of like the writing aspect and thrive on that more than, say, speaking and listening. So, there's a lot of other things that we could talk about with all of these programs, but I'm sure you know that they incorporate video assignments, written assignments, fun, creative, maybe like artistic assignments, and lots of other things. And if we want to talk more later, then we can. But thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. And yeah, for everybody, Discord, that's really interesting to hear that. I was at a conference recently and they use Discord. And for those of you who may not know, it's like a chatting application on steroids. Essentially, you get onto what is like a server, which is essentially like a URL, like this meeting that we're on now, except in each server, you essentially can have access to any number of chats or separate chat rooms that are based around interest topics of interest, depending on what the point of the server is about. So commonly used in gaming before, and now seems like we're seeing a lot more usage in conferences and I guess virtual exchange programs too. What Meredith or Becca, do you have anything to add to this in terms of the format that your exchange programs follow, how do you balance synchronous and asynchronous content? Also, I think some information about like downloadable materials and other kinds of separate self-study options.
Yeah, I can comment on that a little bit. It varies a little bit at IREX depending on the program, where the participants are located, and some other logistical factors like that. But for the Mandela Washington Fellowship, this year we opted to do primarily asynchronous content simply because our American participants are located all over the country and our excuse me, African participants are located all over Africa. I mean, we have folks involved who are as far east as Mauritius and as far west as California. And so the time constraints that those locations bring create some challenges for doing a lot of synchronous content. So what we did from the outset was primarily plan to do asynchronous content and include a lot of other types of materials. And so we not only have video content that was available through YouTube and MP4 downloads, but also transcripts for folks who weren't able to stream or download videos, which are also really helpful for some of our participants who are not native English speakers. We have a number of other resource guides, toolkits, worksheets, things like that that accompany the 21 courses that we've launched this year. And so I'm happy to talk further about this. It really made strides in making those accessible from the get-go. And so we really found that asynchronous content worked best for us simply based on locations that our participants were in. But I know other programs at IREX, for example, the Young Leaders of the Americas initiative, where there's not so much of a time zone difference, did more synchronous content. So I think it really depends on where your participants are, as well as their internet bandwidth and some other things. But that's what ended up working best for us.
Thank you, Meredith. And I think I'm going to actually skip a question here so we can kind of get a little bit more into the accessibility details. And I'm going to ask this next one to Lisa George. As your organization made the shift, I guess in this case, World Learning, what were some of the key resources that helped you to learn about accessibility in virtual exchange environments? And I guess in your case, I guess this shift started even before the pandemic, but what were some of the resources you used in order to figure out how to be more accessible?
Yeah, the relationship with the Stevens Initiative was really, I think, one of our starting places for these conversations with our team. Both the relationship and tools compiled by the Stevens Initiative. They offered one-on-one coaching sessions this year, which our team, especially our leadership team, really took advantage of, as well as a lot of really great webinars, reading a lot of articles, and really just taking an opportunity to jump into this topic as we were pivoting everything virtually. Training for Change also has 2 wonderful free tool books on virtual facilitation, ebook Leading Groups Online and Getting Started with Online Training and Facilitation. And I can send those in chat to Monica to share out with folks if they're interested in exploring a bit further. And I will say our partnership with Mobility International has really been key in growing our team's knowledge and understanding. It's always a growth area as educators, as practitioners. So really keeping abreast of trends, templates, and resources that have been provided. And this participation in this summer's Joining Hands Symposium, while it was near the end of a lot of our virtual programs, I think through what we saw, how accessibility was utilized and talked about, but then also just in the content, we're able to, have some of those really important conversations with our team and then share out or implement lessons learned into our next round of programming that's going on right now.
That's great. Those are all great resources. Thank you, Lisa. And let's go on. Let's hear from Becca Berman. What do you think about the resources that American Councils used as you made the transition to virtual exchange programs?
Yeah, we definitely had the benefit of already having done virtual in SLY. So we were able to take lessons learned from that experience. One of the things I was thinking about is, a lot of time we're using different platforms, and with some of the platforms, especially the smaller ones, sometimes you have, contact in the platform companies, and it's definitely worthwhile to reach out to them to see about what some of the features are related to accessibility. I do think that sometimes with the platform providers, there's kind of a learning curve for them too. So I think it's kind of a nice exchange in that way about working together and, you know, having them make their platform more accessible, but also making it work for you as well. And the other thing I would definitely recommend to people is always check out Section 508 compliant guideline. Section 508 is guidelines that relate to accessible technology. There are many resources online for that. So those are two things I definitely encourage people to consider in addition to, you know, MyUSA and the other resources Lisa mentioned.
Thanks, Becca. Meredith, what do you think?
I agree with everything that Lisa and Becca said, but one thing I wanted to highlight is how we tried to not only like look inward at the resources we had developed, but also work really closely with our partners to ensure that they understood different ways to make their programs, their materials accessible. This summer, as I mentioned, you know, beginning in mid-July, we've launched nearly 24 courses with over a dozen of our university partners across the country. And so since we were aggregating content from a lot of different folks, we took some steps at the beginning to try and create accessible templates, teach them, you know, about alt text and how to write it, how to make other aspects of their documents more accessible, simply because while we know a lot about making documents, videos, et cetera, accessible, some of these were very technical, like GIS and things like that, that we don't necessarily have the technical expertise in. And so we tried to work closely with them to ensure that we were providing them different tools and things like that to work from as the different materials were being created.
That's great. That's great. And it sounds kind of like these are some of this, you're talking a little bit too about strategies. I mean, I think we, you know, it's possible maybe to overlook the fact that the planners of a programmer or of a system are putting together resources, but then there may also be a whole variety of other people on a larger program, like professors, like individuals, students, classroom aides, or TAs that are also putting together materials. And it sounds like you kind of were talking about there some of the strategies that IRIX has used to make sure that even people who maybe aren't really experts on accessibility are still producing accessible content.
Yeah, it was really challenging because at a lot of our universities, you know, we had folks producing courses on a really wide variety of material types. And so while we were liaising with the folks that we normally worked with at the university, we might not necessarily be working just with them. As you said, working with professors, TAs, they're used to standing up in front of a classroom talking about this, and doing that online in a way that's accessible is vastly different. So definitely figured out a lot along the way, depending on people's level of expertise in this, but ultimately got to a good place, I think.
Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, and for everybody, and Meredith, interrupt me if I'm wrong, but IREX, the way that this works is on the Washington Mandela Fellowship, they have leaders from Africa come to do, there's like a central institute, say like in DC, but then they all go out into host communities to different universities where they complete several more weeks of study and in practice. So that's why she's talking about all those different partners that they have that are that they're working with. Let's see. So I'm going to ask Becca this next question. Participation in virtual programs can be challenging for participants who may not have a strong connection or the right equipment. How does American Councils handle these situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we've done with Virtual NSLY Y and NSLY Y VSI, and even our academic year program that are online, is we do a test session with the student before the program begins. And it's basically testing out the platform, introducing students to the platform so they know how to use it. And then this is often where we troubleshoot potential issues with connections or equipment. Obviously, and also when students were accepted into NSLY Y VSI, we've told them about the requirements in terms of obviously having an internet connection as well as having software or headset, and what then we recommend for them to be able to participate in the program. And we understand obviously that can be cost prohibitive for some students. So we did have some money for financial support on a need basis for students who needed internet or computer equipment. So that was one way to help with that. And then another thing too is with virtual NSAY, our policy is to have the camera on at all times during the session. And we find that that helps with student engagement. However, if there's a student having issues with internet connection during the classroom session, the first thing we do suggest to students is to turn off their camera, which often helps to free up bandwidth. Another thing we do is we record all of our classes so the student can access the class at a later time, especially if they have internet connection. We, of course, with that, we share with our practices with the students at the start of the program about our practices with recording and then how the recording will be used. So we do find that recording the classes helps as well with accessing classroom content at a later time for those with spotty internet connection.
Thank you, Becca. Lisa or Meredith, anything to add to that? Sounds like a pretty thorough response so far. Okay. I'm going to, we've kind of talked a lot about design here, and I mean, I think Becca's comments about what happens when people have limited internet connectivity or computer access, financial aid can be one source that programs you might not really expect to have to provide participants financial aid for a better internet connection or maybe a better setup like a microphone, but this is something that our programs are thinking about, and increasing offerings of asynchronous content, for example, in the form of recording classroom content. And I guess while I got you, Becca, I'm gonna ask, what do you think we have on this presentation? And we recommend the application of what is called Communication Access Real-Time Translation, or CART. And I'd like to ask you, Becca, what are some of the best practices for employing CART? We often get a lot of questions about whether it should be done by a human. There are some services out there that use sort of speech transcription. It seems like there's other services that sort of are more like automatic note takers. So I'm not really sure that it's actually a full transcription, but maybe you could offer your thoughts about best practices for CART in virtual environments.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah, so one thing just for everybody to know is that CART means Communication Access Real-Time Translation, which is where there's live captioning with a live captioner who's like this doing this meeting. And it is different than automated captions that you might see on YouTube or on Google platform. I believe very strongly that captioning, especially for virtual exchange, should never be automated. You should always use a live caption, CART. And there's actually a good article from the National Deaf Center on Post-Secondary Outcomes about why automated captioning are not accessible. And Monica, I'm going to send you the link, and it's not working right now. So, oh, okay. So Monica can share that. Okay. So basically, CART is always more accessible than automated captioning. And especially when you do exchange programs, you're working with different languages, and usually technical words such as specific geographies or concept that are not going to be captured with automated caption. And one of the other things, Justin, do you want me to talk about best practices with CART, or hold off on that?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So one of the things that I have noticed in the virtual realm is sometimes people seem to think that it's either or, like CART or ASL interpreter are kind of interchangeable. However, they're completely different in the sense that they're different ways of conveying information. So one of the things I always suggest to people is, kind of either, if you can provide both, great. Otherwise, definitely check with people about, what accommodation needs they have. Some people prefer CART, others prefer ASL interpreter. I'll be honest right now, just with my preference, I'm watching the interpreter more than the captioning. So it just differs with each individual. And one of the things, and it's it's kind of, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about with CUT best practices also can be applied to ASL interpreters or, using screen readers or other accommodation means. So just something to kind of keep in mind. But basically, for any means of accommodation, make sure that there's a way for students or participants to request accommodation as early as possible in the program. One of the things American Counselors has is we have a policy that if once students are accepted into the program, they have 7 days to let us know about any accommodation request. And that way we find out early in advance. And especially if you're doing virtual events, it's always a good idea to have a contact information for somebody to reach out to if they have any requests for accommodation. And using CUT, ASL interpreters, or other means, you should always do a tech run on a platform beforehand. And because often sometimes it will differ based on the platform, or there might be unique situation, which I've noticed with Zoom sometimes is that when you do screen share, the interpreter kind of moves around. There's always little nuances. So it's always really good to do a tech run. And kind of another example, once we had, what happened was we did an event, and when we did a screen share for a video that had captions on it. But then during the actual event itself, the caption disappeared. And I think that was kind of a unique situation, but just kind of an example of kind of little thing to think about when you kind of prepare for a meeting, and especially with technical issues that might come up. Yeah.
Thanks, Becca. Thank you so much. And budget for accommodations, because because CART and interpreters, they do cost. And so we always recommend that there's budgeting for accommodations. And oftentimes, if you have a university partner, for example, there should be a pool of funding set aside specifically for accommodations. So it's not having to necessarily come out of the program budget. But if you're also a provider, we recommend that providers are allocating a certain amount of their operating budget towards these expenses. So the next question I'm going to direct to Lisa George. Oftentimes on virtual programs, you have multiple people that are involved in the development of the content. How does your organization manage this aspect? Very briefly.
Yeah, so this summer in particular, and similar to other folks, with the pivot to virtual for both our USG funded and then the cancellation of the in-person experiment programming, our whole unit really had to look closely at our staffing plans, roles, and responsibilities for summer months. So regardless of job titles and normal job responsibilities, really creating a space for openness and flexibility within the team, so that we were able to balance workloads while also ensuring that all of our youth staff, regardless if they were normal programming team, admissions, or operations staff, were really engaged and funder deliverables continued to be met. And so it really wasn't all hands in programming mode this summer. To prep everyone, the whole youth team took part in a 25-hour custom designed online training module to really bolster familiarity with our online platforms, to enhance online mediation, facilitation skills, and build a deeper understanding of program learning goals and curriculums, especially for those who weren't normally in programming mode. And then staff were kind of grouped to develop the modules that we were following. So we had a blueprint that went over across all of our programs that really could be utilized, whether it was a youth ambassadors portfolio, a Hovenius and Axion exchange, and then created space for customization. So my much shorter answer, because I know we're a little running low on time.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. And I definitely have a couple questions left for our panelists, but I wanted to check in with Monica if you have seen any questions from our audience in the chat.
Yep, this is Monica. I know Becca touched on some of the issues with internet connectivity and equipment, but somebody also had the question about distractions of just the switch from students learning from home, with parents working from home, other kids being in the space. So if you have any kind of programming that you built considering these types of distractions or new setup, and then also tools for helping students engage in the cultural aspects of exchange that are commonly learned by being in a physical place. Meredith,
What do y'all think?
Those are really good questions.
Yeah.
I can speak more to the first one. I would say, excuse me, that was part of the motivation also for us to go with asynchronous content this year. For the Mandela Washington Fellowship, we have 4,400 alumni across 49 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and we had over 1,000 selected finalists and alternate candidates for 2021 who we knew could potentially be partaking in our program. With such a large pool of folks, and knowing that they all have jobs and lives that they're also managing in the midst of this pandemic, having content be available asynchronously is definitely a benefit, because it meant that they were able to do it on their own time in a way that fit around the other obligations that they had. From a cultural exchange standpoint, I will say that wasn't as much of a consideration for us this year, because we ended up postponing what our normal fellowship would look like, and then launched the other courses that I mentioned earlier in lieu of regular programming this year, simply because the way our program is structured, fellows spend the first 6 weeks in cohorts of 25 at our universities across the country, and then there's a big summit in DC. And with having to cancel or postpone the program on fairly short notice, we opted to try to do something different that all of our alumni and potential incoming candidates could benefit from, rather than try and reinvent the program completely virtually this year.
Thanks, Meredith. Does anybody else have anything to share?
Yeah, to add on to the cultural piece specifically, for our programs, we really looked at ways that we could tap into program alumni. So they actually joined a lot of our programs as peer mentors, leading discussion groups, really serving as an extra layer of participants. And they were participants from like the country of exchange. So for our US youth ambassadors who should have been going to Brazil, we had Brazilian youth ambassadors join as peer mentors to help with that cultural piece. We also incorporated virtual homestays. So through the peer mentorship, or also just recruiting host families through our networks, students were able to do a virtual homestay over the weekend. We gave the students different activities they could do together, such as cooking a meal, having a meal together virtually, watching a movie, but also really left it up to the families and the participants. And it really was, I think, one of the highlights of the programs for the students.
Great. Thank you. And this is Monica again. I just want to let the participants know that we are recording this session. And so we will share the recording afterwards. And then Meredith and Becca, if I can make sure to get a list of the programs that you're mentioning. And so then to the participants, we'll make sure to share out everybody's list of programs as the follow-up with the recording as well. And Justin, I've got a couple more questions. Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, let's do that.
Great. One question is about supporting blind participants in a virtual space. They're asking, they encompassed or just had some difficulties during the pandemic, and if we have, or anybody has suggestions to put in place services like the organization Be My Eyes.
Be My Eyes, by the way, refers to a smartphone app that is, I believe, available on Android and iPhone. You download the app to your smartphone, and basically it's you just call you press the call button, and it puts you in touch with a volunteer who's sighted. And essentially the person who is looking out of your back camera, and you essentially point your phone at objects, and the volunteer on the other line can describe them to you. I think it can be definitely useful. But what do our panelists think?
That sounds really cool, and I want to, I'd love to learn more about that app. For us, we primarily, because we were doing asynchronous content, were producing a lot of documents and things like that. And so we typically in our programming, like it's mostly in person, and we're providing personalized accommodations depending on folks' needs. But we really took more of a broad strokes approach to ensure that anyone who did have a site-related disability would be able to access our materials from the get-go. So we, as I mentioned earlier, worked with our different content creators on some things that they could do to help with this process. But there were a lot of great tools built into Microsoft Office, Adobe, and some other programs that we found to be really helpful. We trained a lot of different folks on our team because otherwise there would have been a even larger burden on the couple of us who were responsible for ensuring the look and feel of content. And so we really concentrated on making sure that no matter what type of disability someone had, once they accessed our materials, they would be able to consume them.
Meredith, that's great feedback, and I think Be My Eyes is really an app that a person would use if they were trying to make an inaccessible object accessible, and it's good to emphasize that you're making content accessible from the beginning. So when blind people are using their personal assistive technology, the technology is able to read the files that are being used in the program. And I guess I would add to that, making sure you're using an accessible platform. I was reading a while back an article on how to make virtual webinars accessible, and one of the groups they mentioned were blind people. But ironically, the person didn't even bring up the topic of using an accessible webinar platform. And if you're not going to do that, then you kind of are being sabotaged from the beginning. So programs like Adobe Connect and GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting really are ineffective at this point for providing access to blind people, and it really has to be another platform that's more responsive. I mean, we use Zoom. I think there's some promise with Google Meet and also Microsoft Teams.
And Justin, this is Monica, and Meredith, that question was actually from a Mandela Washington Fellow who's joining us right now. Go ahead, Becca.
Oh, okay. So just then to add to Justin's comment, in addition to platforms, also think about which equipment would also be accessible with certain apps or features. For example, I know sometimes there's some apps that work better on an iPad or others that might work better on a desktop. That's another consideration to have with what equipment students are using.
Great, thank you.
And
Monica, do we see any other questions?
Yep, I just have one more.
Perfect.
This is from a director of an accessibility resource office at a university, and he has been trying to bridge relations with global engagement and asking if there are ways that he can collaborate with your organizations to arrange virtual options throughout the pandemic. Any thoughts or suggestions are welcomed. So again, this is an accessibility disability office at a university looking to bridge relations with these type of programs. And I know this is a great opportunity because it's not like a university where we're learning. IREX, American Councils, actually have a disability office, unlike universities. And so, yeah, it's a good question if you all see any opportunities for further collaborations.
What do you think, Lisa?
My program is specifically for high school. My program is specifically for high school students. However, American Council has a lot of programs related to colleges and universities. What I would definitely encourage you to do is check out the American Council's website. I'm sure Lisa and Meredith might say the same for their organization, for which programs related to universities. You're definitely welcome to reach out to me directly as well.
I would echo that. IREX works with a lot of different colleges and universities across the country. And so depending on what specific needs questions are, I'm more than happy to speak with you or to connect you to my colleagues who might be more appropriate.
Great. Thank you. So I am gonna bust out some more questions of my own. And of course, we do have some time left. So audience members, if you have any more questions, but I would like to ask, based on your interactions with, based on your interactions with colleagues and kind of your personal experience, what do you see as being the future of virtual exchange programs in the field, especially after the pandemic? Do you think that these programs will continue to have a place when there's no more coronavirus?
I'm sure Lisa and Becca would echo this, but I think definitely that's something we've actually been talking a lot about on my team and elsewhere at IREX. I think that during and after the pandemic, we'll continue to see more programs doing different types of virtual engagement. But I think that one of the other things that we will see is that there will be more virtual opportunities integrated into existing programs that after the pandemic will primarily be in person. We've been talking about different ways that virtual aspects of programs could help to foster long-term engagement between American hosts and participants, create different opportunities for folks who aren't able to travel to, say, a country that a fellow that they hosted lives in, but want to continue working together. So I think that there are a lot of different possibilities, and we'll see a variety of virtual, in-person, and hybrids.
Thank you, Meredith. Lisa or Becker, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Meredith said. I think COVID has really forced us to take a step back from the work that we've been doing at World Learning and think of creative ways to how can we get the same learning goals and outcomes with these young people and create connection authentically when the travel, the ability to meet in person is no longer there. And for, I'm sure all of us would say the same for our teams. Like, I'm incredibly proud of the work our team has done this year. They were not hired as virtual programming folks, experts, and they've done an amazing job. And I think how students have engaged with the programming as well has really opened our eyes to all the benefits that are from pure virtual programming, but also thinking ahead to how do we incorporate virtual elements into continued in-person programming or the return to in-person programming. I think there's just a lot more opportunities out there, and really what does our exchange industry look like in 5 years now that we've had this opportunity to really make the most and leverage virtual exchanges.
Nice.
One thing, in addition to what Lisa Meredith said, I'm really curious about is that there's a lot of really unique apps that we're discovering now during COVID, and especially like Discord you mentioned. And I can totally see as afterwards with overseas program incorporating some of the apps or some of the e-learning tools that we used during COVID and kind of continuing that, integrating more virtual learning, even in a in-person classroom. And I know we've already talked about as an organization with American Councils and NSCY is using some more virtual elements in pre-programming and with alumni activity. So I think that the technology we're experiencing now is really going to be a unique way to keep our alumni connected after the program ends.
That's great. And I think maybe it sounds like that kind of builds on maybe my last question here, which is how do you think that your experience providing virtual exchange programs may impact the way that you do in-person programs in the future? Meredith.
I mean, I think to build on what I was saying before, I think that there are a lot of ways that we can use current technology to make a more robust during and post-program experience for folks. I mean, when I think about the Mandela Washington Fellowships, I've been working on the program for 7 years now. If this had happened at the beginning, when we were just launching the program, the technology was vastly different then. Things have changed awful lot in the past several years. And so I think that there are just, because of the different technologies that are available now, whether it's chat apps like Discord or things like Zoom, Teams, and other sites that we use like Canvas to actually launch our e-curriculum, I think that we have so many more resources at our disposal. And so I think that these types of technologies are going to make both both virtual and in-person programs more robust moving forward. I think it just creates a lot of opportunities.
Thank you.
And I think I would add to that, it's the new opportunities it's creating, but also very cost effective. Like, how much savings was there when you're not paying for flights, for visas, for passports, and yes, like budgeting in for interpreters and other, accessibility considerations, but there's still a lot more space, I think, to really stretch budgets. Whether it's internal budgets or working through USG funding, which World Learning, a lot of our programs are. So I think that creative budgeting, like how much more we can stretch the programs and the learning outcomes, is really, we're only starting to really scratch the surface of it.
That's great. Maybe just like one closing question. One of the things I've kind of observed, I could see having application even in in-person programs is that telemedicine and also access to teletherapy services. And I've heard of different websites now. Even I think we were at a NAFSA collegial conversation a while back, and they were talking about using services like 7 Cups, for example, to give participants access to trained listeners and ultimately to licensed therapists in the case of situations where the college has a group account. And I'm kind of curious if you all have any experience in working with those applications. I think like one of the things that we'd like to see more of is also maybe some comment about making sure those applications are accessible. Like I thought it was a really great idea, but I didn't hear anybody cover the question of whether or not any of those online services like 7 Cups offer screen reader accessible resources or interpreters or CART for in-person meetings.
Sorry, can you clarify what the question is exactly?
What was that?
Sorry, so are you asking about, are we going to incorporate new technology in our program with telehealth?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of interested, I guess it's kind of a curveball question, but what your thoughts are about how access to mental health and telehealth type services would work with in-person program participants with disabilities, and that would have some of the access requirements that we're talking about right now. But when you're providing the services through a third-party company.
It's a really interesting question, Justin. I know that in
you
the
can totally
past,
answer it in the theoretical too. That's totally okay.
Yeah, I think for me, this is going to have to largely be theoretical, but I can tell you that in the past for our in-person programs, if we have someone who has an accommodation need and needs to get some kind of mental or physical health care, we work with them to arrange whatever is needed so that they're able to fully participate in the appointment, make sure that their needs are being met, that sort of thing. I think that it could be, it could be really interesting. You mentioned like the 7 Cups, and like I know Headspace and like other apps and things like that can be really valuable for folks. Our team all goes through mental health first aid training, and so we have through that like been exposed to different resources, but I'm not as familiar with their specific accessibility aspects. However, I do know that like on a case-by-case situation, we've done everything that we can to ensure accessibility. So it's a really interesting idea, though, and I think really important one to consider, given that with more folks moving to different virtual environments, we're going to need to come up with new and creative ways to provide support to people.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely food for thought. All right, well, great, everybody. That will conclude our panel. It is past the hour. So thank you so much to our participants for your excellent participation and experience. Thanks to the audience for joining us and your interest in this topic. Please follow up. Please keep an eye out in your inbox as we're going to be sending out a survey, transcript, recording of all these of this discussion. And also, we are planning another panel discussion on international students with disabilities. And you're going to be getting the chance to meet 3 individuals from around the world who have come to earn degrees in the United States. And you're going to get to hear their stories. So keep an eye out in our newsletter and our other resources. Let us know so that to find out when that webinar comes up. It should be in early part of December. And with that, I wish everybody a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Justin, Monica.
Bye.
Thank you.